Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and if you've purchased or maybe are thinking about buying one of our beginner kits, want to get a feel for leathercraft, this video is just for you. Now, right up front, here's the biggest point to this video. You're not going to believe what you're capable of creating with virtually no experience. You'll see what I'm talking about. So we're going to look at the kit and the contents. We're going to go through this, but then let's take those contents and make a very cool little fold-over pouch. That's beautiful, and it's a very simple, good beginner project. Just what we're looking for. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to our website. Now, one more point. Check your notifications. That way you'll know exactly when each of our videos releases. All right, so let's talk more kit. Let's see what's in our kit. The best thing about this kit, no fluff. Everything here is essential. We're going to use about 90% of this on every project. Now I say 90%. Our art knife, we can absolutely cut leather with this, but this does one of the coolest things I've ever seen in leathercraft. We'll come back to that. So up here, our needles. If you watch any of our videos, the only needle I use is the John James number 18 and the Ritza 0.8 millimeter. We've got this in some gorgeous colors and 4 different sizes. On our scratch awl, that's the most quality scratch awl I have ever seen. That's going to last multiple lifetimes. On our groover, I consider this an absolutely essential tool, and I use this on every project, every edge. We'll get a good look at how this works. For our sewing chisels, you're not going to believe how easy it is to hand sew and how good it looks. We're going to use a 5 millimeter diamond. That creates a gorgeous stitch line. Our pony, our trusty pony. Now, I haven't assembled this yet. Simply a bolt and a wing nut, but that allows this to turn. Makes sewing very easy and very comfortable. Now, over to our art knife. We can cut leather with this, absolutely. Now, I tend to prefer a box knife. We'll cut our project with this, but here's what this allows us to do. This is called a filigree cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut through our face leather. We're going to drop another piece of leather behind that. Is that not gorgeous? Color combinations, texture combinations, and we can even step that up a little bit. Here's a belt I finished recently. So I've tooled in a feather. I've cut through the background and I've brought in a white leather up behind that. Now you may think I'm exaggerating, but you're really not that far from working up to projects like this. Okay, we've got a good idea for what's in our kit. Let's reset here, start working on some leather. If you're new to leathercraft, we're going to have a good time with it. That's one of the big points. But secondly, this is a very simple project. I'm going to do my best to explain every step in detail. Now, one more point. I don't know if a ding or a Band-Aid is worse. That's going to make me crazy. It's going to be in the middle of every shot. We'll do our best to ignore that. Here's our project. So this is just a simple little fold-over pouch. Now, we just changed the dimensions, and we've got a laptop pouch, tablet pouch, cell phone case, tool case, all kinds of ways we can go with this, but we can get very creative here as well. But let's notice, this is just one long piece. So, for the most part, I'm going to take a piece of paper. Copy paper is fine. We've all got some. So 4 inches wide, and I'm going to do 3 increments at 5 inches. So basically, we've got 3 4x5 inch panels. Let's bend one end in on our 5-inch mark. That's going to be our pouch. The other side down, that's going to be our flap. For the most part, that's all we're doing. But we're going to make some alterations because there are some things here that are going to make sense, but also these are little tricks and tips that we're going to be able to use on other projects. So right here, if we didn't trim or taper our flap, then it would not sit in here comfortably. So we're going to taper this down. Secondly, our pocket, if we brought that all the way up to 5 inches, which we can, but that throat's going to be right at our bend, and it's going to bind a little bit. So we're going to trim a little distance off of our pocket. Now, on our end cut, this is very cool. We can go all kinds of ways here. A good place to be very creative. So we could go straight across, we could make a point, some kind of cool little design. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Let's jump over to our digital pick. So we're going 4 inches wide, or about 10.16 centimeters. Now we've got our pockets, but notice on our pocket, we're at 4 1/4 inches instead of 5 inches on our back, and on our flap, we're just going to come in 1 inch and we're going to taper on both sides in 1/4 of an inch. Down at the bottom, we simply have our little strap. Now we're going to cut this a little bit longer. So that's 4 1/8. So again, that will slide through smoothly. Okay, so on our little flap here, we're almost done here. We're going to start cutting some leather shortly. Like I said, I may explain things in too much detail. But what I've got is just this cool little point. All we have to do, let's take a piece of copy paper, the same width of our flap. Let's fold that over, and we simply make a single cut. We can use a template if we want to, or we can freehand this. The point is when we open this up, now we've got a symmetrical point on that, and it's going to look great. Very easy to do. Okay, so enough talk. Let's jump over to our main table, start cutting some leather. I am notorious for picking the darkest possible colors for our videos, but this is a gorgeous leather. This is our Santa Rosa oily pull-up in the wine color. Now, a pull-up leather, you've probably heard that term or are going to. All this means is that the tannery has added a lighter dye color than the color of the oil or the wax in the leather. So therefore, when we push from the back, notice it changes colors. Or say we bend it, that's a lighter color dye pulling up. That's all that means. But this is a beautiful leather. All right, so on our pattern, we work with copy paper. It's not a great pattern material. Poster board from our pharmacy or grocery store. I love working with this. A step up. This is our pattern sheeting. It's plastic, so very durable, but it's easy to cut and easy to mark. Now, with our leather, let's drop our pattern in. Now, one side note, these two lines, we can simply cut 2 slits in the back of our pouch, so therefore it becomes a belt pouch. We're not going that route, but we could do that. So let's take our pattern. Let's lay that in a corner. Now, these are typically die cut, so we can usually rely on the fact that that's a square corner, and it looks like it, but let's keep an eye on that always. Now, with our awl, let's just trace out around our pattern. Well, that's easy enough to see. Very cool. So let's cut this. Now we're going to use our square. I like to use a box cutter. This is a great knife, but I would like to save this blade, say for my pattern work or the filigree we talked about or our close-in work. So what we're going to do is go with a simple box knife. So let's cut this out. New blade every time. That's a big help. Let's start our projects with a new blade. Good. Now, past that taper, let's just continue and then circle around. Okay, good. Now, on our taper, this is going to come in handy. This is a great trick because we'll use this on belts and all kinds of straps. But let's do this right at the bottom of our curve. Let's lay our square across here, and let's just put a small mark in our lines. There we go, if we can see that. The point is that's going to be the start or stop for our cuts out. So therefore, it's very symmetrical. Let's lay our square in and let's cut. Good. Same on the other side. All right. Now, we could use a belt tip or an English point punch. It's shaped like this, a belt tip. It's easy enough to clip that off, but if we're new, we may not have one of those. So let's simply take our knife and do our best to follow that curve freehand. Okay, that looks nice and even. Now on our end, if we're not comfortable cutting a round corner, all we have to do is make a series of small cuts until we get to our more straight line, and there we go. So easy enough. Now, is it a perfect corner? No, it's not, but it looks pretty good. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, well there we go. That doesn't look bad and relatively easy. With a new blade, leather cuts nicely. Now we need one more piece here. We need our small strap. So this is going to be 3/4 of an inch by 4 1/8 long. So let's do this. Let's use our knife to mark our measurements here. So I'm going to come in from my edge 3/4. Same down here. That gives us a very accurate mark. So let's cut a little bit longer than 4 1/8. Good. Let's trim this out, and we're going to leave this longer for just a minute. You'll see why here very shortly. Okay, let's reset at our groove line. A groover is going to do a number of things for us. In fact, this is going to be one of our most used tools in our shop. Now, the primary job here, we're going to groove, literally cut a groove in our leather down the edge, parallel to our edge. So therefore, if we're going to hand sew this, our chisel is going to sit right in that groove line. It's going to be very consistent. But also, because it's a groove, our thread's going to sink down in it. That's going to reduce the risk of it snagging or grabbing. So on my groover, we'll look at this, then we'll jump over to the one from the kit. We've got a couple of changes. So with this, I've got a cutting head. There we go. I've got a cutting head and an arm. All I'm going to do is butt that arm against the edge of my leather. I'm going to pull my hand up about 45 degrees, and I'm going to give this just a little counterclockwise pressure. We don't need much. The tool's going to do the job. There we go. So first off, not a hard tool to master, but there's our edge. Now, I mentioned I use this on every edge, whether I'm sewing or not. That's exactly right, because it's going to dress up our edge. So right there, there's our groove line. Same on this pouch, on our face. There's our groove line. So again, it dresses up our edge. One more example. So with this, when we fold that over, well, that looks pretty cool. But let's fold that over with a groove line. All the difference in the world in the look. Beautiful edge. So that's another reason we're going to use our groover, simply for decoration. So on the piece that comes with the kit, we're going to come with, this is going to come with what's called a spoon. Now, a spoon is simply a guide. Now, these are adjustable, so I can move that arm in and out, I think to about 1.5 inches. So I can put this guide on the edge of my leather, and I can draw that across. So now we've got a guideline if we want to do some stamping or some tooling. But I tend to like the cutting head because, again, that cuts a groove. Secondly, right here I've got this marked. I keep this at 1/8 of an inch. So if I'm going to groove two pieces and marry those together with a stitch line, we're going to have a perfect meet down the edge. One last point. I know like I said, I might go into too much explanation here. So with our groover, notice our arm here. I've trimmed mine down. Well, first off, that's going to void the warranty, and I need to toss that out there. But the problem is, let's scoot this out. There we go. So if I'm going to run that down the edge, notice where my finger is. I'm trying to hold my leather down. That's going to hit my finger, and it's going to go right off. That's going to look terrible. So therefore, I can trim that bar down. But let's do this. Let's sand that, because that's going to be going right by our finger. But it's pretty easy to trim off and to sand. All right, so on this piece, we're going to groove all the way around. And there we go. Now, we can always do our best to try to get our corners to meet. But if we run off the end, that's not going to be a big deal. Perfect? No, it's not. But it looks pretty good. So let's take our strap. Same thing, we're going to groove both sides. Okay, and on this, we cut this long simply so that, notice I've got starts there where I didn't really start very well. Well, let's just trim that off. Now let's trim out to 4 1/8 of an inch. Good. All right, one more reset. We're going to add some tape. Then we're going to jump over, chisel, sew this, and we're done. Now, this step can be a little confusing, and it's simply because not everything is right side up, and you'll notice some of these words are upside down. Well, here's why. So when we fold our pocket around, I'm going to write pocket in there right side up. Then my flap down, right flap, right side up. Same with my back. Here's where I'm going with this. Let's lay in our pattern, and let's scribe from our pattern, or 4 1/4 inches in, let's scribe a line right there. So that's our bottom bend. We'll never see that. We can mark that. But here's where we can get confused. This is only 4 1/4 inches. So therefore, what we need to do, let's flip this around. I'm going to drop this in right on that line. Now I know how high my pocket is. It's not 5 inches, it's 4 1/4. So let's drop in a mark on both sides. So now we know where our bend is, because really our tendency is to come up to 5 inches, and that's simply too high. But now we know exactly where we're going to drop that in. Now, I love our Leathercraft cement. It's great for leather, but this is our double-sided tape. It doesn't come in our kit, but this is a fantastic addition, very helpful in our shop. There we go. So with this, all we have to do is drop this in on one side, and the other side will stick down. So let's take a piece about the distance between our line and our mark, and let's drop that in right on our edge. Good. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now the trick with removing the tape, we don't want to peel it. Let's take our thumb and scrape across there. That way the backing will separate. Good. Now let's fold up to our mark. Nice, and press this down. Now this tape is great, but all told, it's not really going to hold that bend down as far as we want it. Doesn't matter, the tape or the glue, it's just there long enough for us to get our chisel line in. So let's press that down. Now, for our strap, I did not include this on the pattern because for the most part, depending on how we want to cut this, if we just want a point or maybe a cut across, we can move this strap up and down. But what we're going to do here is we're going to come down 3/4 of an inch from our throat. So let's do this. Let's come down 3/4 of an inch, make a mark in our groove line. Same on this side. Now we can lay that in. So let's add some double-sided tape to both ends of this. Okay, let's drop that right under those two marks. Now this is a little bit longer, just so that the flap will slide a little bit more easily through that, but we expect that. Now, with our groover, we can always just drop in a small groove line if we need to. That will, for the most part, disappear under our stitch line, but if we need to, we've got a guide there. Now, one more point, and I forgot to mention this, but this is a great addition for our groover. We can always take our arm out. Now this becomes a freehand groover. So if I want to, say, drop in a decorative stitch line, I can always freehand groove, or if I'm further in, I can always use my straight edge to add a groove. So again, a tool that is well worth its money. Very nice. Let's step over to our punch table, drop in our chisel line. Let's talk about some work surfaces. This is our marble. This is the center of our leather shop. We're going to use this on every project. Secondly, here's our punch board. We'll use this for our chisels or round hole punches or end punches. The problem is this is very slick. Same with our quartz. So what I'm going to do is just drop a piece of scrap leather in between the two. So therefore that's going to deaden the sound a little bit, but notice that's not moving around now. So on our chisel, we've got 4 chisels in our kit. We've got a 6, 4, 2, and 1. So with our 6, that's going to cover some distance. Here's the problem. Getting the chisel through the leather, that's not really an issue. The problem is getting it back out. So we can always back down to, say, a 4 if we're having trouble getting our chisel back out. You'll see what I'm talking about there. But with this, let's take our 4-prong and let's drop our first tine right where our 2 groove lines come together, and I'm going to drop that in our groove. Now, I want to hit this as straight up and down as I can. Well, that's not always possible. So what I would prefer to do, let's lean out a little bit. I don't want to lean in because we run the risk of coming through the edge of our leather. But let's do our best to get that straight up and down. All right, let's feel our bottom. There we go. We've got tines all the way across. Now let's put our finger down and let's just simply work our chisel back out. Good. Now we're not stretching our leather or our holes. So, first tine, last hole. But now we're going through 3 plies. But you notice what? That chisel went right through it. Notice we're hitting that groove line on the back, spot on. So let's work that out. Yeah, 3. That's what I meant about sometimes it's harder to get it out than in. All right, so let's first tine, last hole. I can feel my tines. Let's work that out. Now we're back to 2-ply. Let's jump over to our 6. We're going to cover some ground. First tine, last hole. And down to our end. That's actually going to work out pretty perfectly. That's where we want our last hole. So first tine, last hole. And there we go. Let's feel some tines. I've got them. Now we've got smaller chisels here. Say we've got a round corner. Well, with our 1 or our 2, we can work our way around a corner. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And our last chisel, work that out. Let's be cautious of this because this can happen. If we've got the longer chisel and we're trying to work our tines out, yeah, there we go. If we're trying to work our tines out, let's be careful because if we're really pressing down and we work one side out, our tendency is to go backwards and we may pinch our finger. So on that one, let's be a little cautious. But that's easy enough, right? All right, let's step over. We're going to drop in a very easy stitch line and we're done with this beautiful project. Much like our groover, this is the pony that's going to come in our kit, but we're going to use mine because there's a couple of little tricks here. Now that simply bolts on. This is made to where we can sit on it. That keeps our work right in front of us. It's very comfortable. That's the point here, comfort. So with mine, I've got a C-clamp. I've got it clamped down to my table. I tend to sew when I stand up. I feel like I've got better vision, more upper body strength. But the point there is I can always clamp this on the side of my table. And if we like a lower chair, that's going to hold our sewing right in front of us. Again, the big point here is comfort. Now, right up here, you'll notice I've got some leather right on the ends of the prongs. So therefore, when I clamp this down, it's not going to damage my leather. And here's a funny one. This is a great trick. Right here, we've got our little clip that opens that up. Our thread will always catch on this and release it. It'll make you nuts. So let's just take a little piece of tape, wrap that around that. That cures that problem. Okay, let's start to sew. We're going to go with what's called a saddle or a saddler stitch. It's a very easy stitch, easy on our hands, looks great. And if you've ever tried to take one out, it's a very strong stitch. So on our needles, that's our John James number 18, comes with our kit. But on our thread, we're going to go with a 0.8 millimeter. In the kit, we get the black, the Timeless Classic. But I'm going to go with a white simply so that we can see our stitch line once we get this in. But in the Ritza, we've got some gorgeous colors. And in fact, if you add a different colored stitch line, that is a beautiful detail. Now on our thread, I want to go about 4 times my length. Now I'm going to go a little bit further simply because I don't want to get down to the end and have 2 little nubs that I'm going to try to tie a knot with. So let's start at this end. We're going to sew this way and we're going to hide a knot right up in here. Now with our saddler stitch, we've got a needle on both ends of our thread. So let's come down to our bottom hole. One needle through the first hole. Let's equalize out our length. Now the second hole. Let's come through from one side, one or the other, and I'm going to open up that hole. I'm going to take my second needle and I'm going to push that through. So there we go. Let's get that in. Good. Let's get about halfway through. Now I'm going to make a little bit of an X. So therefore I'm going to move my first finger and my thumb from the eye to the point and let's just pull that through. Good. Let's give that a little bit of tension. We don't want to pull this so hard that this starts to ripple. But I can see that stitch sink down in just a little bit. So second hole, let's lead with one needle, drop the second one in, make an X. There we go. Okay, so hand sewing, not tough at all. But look at that. That's starting to look good. I'm going to sew down to the end. Now we're down to our last 2 holes. So let's go through our second to the last. But let's don't really draw that down yet. You'll see where I'm going with this. Let's go to our last hole. And now we're going to come back 1 hole. What we're doing is adding a double loop here because this is going to be a stress point. So let's take this needle and we're just going to come through the front ply. Let's pull that in. And on the back, same thing with the back needle. Good. Now, let's pull this taut, and to me it's easiest if we simply pull one thread at a time. Good, that locks that down. Now, there's no great way to get this camera shot because what we're going to do is we're going to tie a square knot in here. But even if we can't see it well, you'll certainly understand what we're doing. So let's take this for a square knot. I'm going to take my right thread, go over my left, circle around that, and let's draw that down in there. And I can even use my finger to push that thread deep in there. Basically, we're hiding a knot down under the throat, okay? Left over right. Circle around, and then let's drop that down in there. Good. Now let's take our knife. We rarely use, let's turn that back around. We rarely use this part of our blade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull on this thread a little bit taut, and I'm going to pull the thread. There we go. I'm going to pull the thread across my blade. I'm not cutting into my leather. So easy enough on that side. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, well that looks good. One more step and we're finished. Let's jump back to our punch table. We're going to hammer down our stitch line. Now I say hammer, we're more going to tap. But this to me is a very important step with our stitch line. We can always use a tack hammer or our mallet. Now with this, notice that's my striking area. So I want to hammer down with this side. But I don't want to hammer down so hard that I damage the leather. But we're just going to press that down. There we go. Okay, noticeable difference. What we're doing is we're spreading out our stitch line. We're closing the holes down so we see more stitch than hole. Now, if we were on a thicker leather and had a deeper groove line, that would sink down into that groove line. But right there, I can feel the thread, but I can also feel that it's sitting tightly against that top grain. So let's do the other side. Well, that looks fantastic. Very simple, but very cool project. Let's see how our flap fits in. Oh, just right. Does that not look great? Love every detail of this. Now, we picked up all kinds of tricks and tips. Notice our groove line makes a great decoration. We've learned to sew, taper. What a great, simple project. And that's exactly right. A simple project, but beautiful and versatile. Best part, a jumping off point to unlimited possibilities. I hope every pouch you make is spot on beautiful. Good luck with your projects.